Marriage is supposed to be a partnership, right? That's what everyone tells you at the wedding, what they put in the vows, what all those self-help books preach. But here's what nobody mentions. Sometimes one person just naturally takes the lead, and the other person gets to enjoy the benefits. That's not wrong. That's just how some relationships work. I'm Victoria, 29, and I thought I had figured out the perfect balance. Joshua and I had been together for 5 years, married for 3, and those early days were incredible. Passionate, exciting, everything clicking into place like we were meant for each other. He worked in logistics, something with supply chains and spreadsheets that made his eyes light up but put me to sleep whenever he tried explaining it. I had my part-time position at a local boutique, nothing too demanding, which gave me plenty of flexibility for the things that actually mattered. Our house was gorgeous, this updated colonial that Joshua had been paying on for years before I moved in. I made it feel like a home, though. Added the feminine touches, made it somewhere people actually wanted to visit instead of just a bachelor pad with mismatched furniture. The mortgage was steep, but he handled all that financial stuff. I focused on making our life beautiful, maintaining our social connections, being the kind of wife that made other men jealous of what he had, and I was good at it. I looked incredible at his work functions, charmed his colleagues, remembered their wives' names, and asked about their kids. I kept myself in shape, dressed well, never embarrassed him in public. I didn't cheat, didn't flirt with other men, didn't do any of the things that destroy marriages. My presence elevated his entire life. Before me, he was just some logistics guy who spent weekends organizing his closet and reading industry magazines. But somewhere after our first anniversary, things started shifting in ways I didn't appreciate. Joshua began making these little comments about household stuff, like he expected me to be running some kind of domestic operation. I mean, I worked too, even if it wasn't the grueling schedule he kept. Why should I be responsible for every meal, every load of laundry, every dish in the sink? We weren't living in the 1950s. I started ordering takeout more often instead of cooking elaborate meals every night. Left dishes for later, when I had better things to do. Let the laundry pile up until it was actually necessary to deal with it. These weren't character flaws, they were normal human behaviors. But Joshua started getting this tone, this disappointed voice, like I was failing some test I didn't know I was taking. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night after he'd worked one of his marathon days. 14 hours, he kept emphasizing like I was supposed to drop everything and throw him a parade. I'd had a perfectly lovely day. Got my nails done at this new place Lindsay recommended, had a long lunch with her and Veronica at that cute cafe downtown, did some shopping. Normal stuff that wives do. When I got home, I posted some pictures from lunch on Facebook. Just casual shots of our food and drinks. Lindsay looked amazing in hers, and I made sure to tag the restaurant because their aesthetic was so Instagram-worthy. I was still scrolling through comments when Joshua walked in, looking all dramatic and exhausted. The house wasn't exactly pristine, sure. There were some dishes in the sink from my breakfast and the snacks I'd had before meeting the girls. The laundry he'd mentioned that morning was still sitting in the basket. I'd been planning to get to it, but my day had gotten away from me. It's not like we were living in squalor or anything, but he started in immediately. Did you get a chance to handle the laundry? Like he was my supervisor instead of my husband. I could feel my eyes rolling before I could stop them. I didn't sign up to be a housewife, I told him, not even looking up from my phone. The comments on my lunch post were actually pretty entertaining. That's when he got that condescending tone, like he was talking to a child who wasn't understanding basic concepts. Started going on about partnership and contribution and all this therapy speak nonsense that sounded like he'd been reading relationship books or something. What exactly do you think you're contributing to this relationship? He asked, and the audacity of that question just floored me. I'm his wife. That should be contribution enough right there. But fine. If he wanted a detailed breakdown, I could give him one. I attend his company events and smile pretty for his colleagues, making him look successful and well-matched. I maintain my appearance so he has an attractive wife he can be proud of. I haven't cheated on him, which is apparently more than half the wives in our social circle can claim. I bring culture and social connections to his life. Before me, his idea of entertainment was reorganizing his desk drawers. But apparently, none of that mattered to him. He wanted me to be his personal chef and cleaning service too, on top of everything else I was already doing. That night, he actually chose to sleep on the couch instead of our bed. I had Lindsay and Veronica over for wine and some reality TV, nothing loud or disruptive, just normal friend time. But he claimed he needed rest before another early shift, like my social life was somehow less important than his beauty sleep. The passive-aggressive move was so obvious, it was almost funny. The next morning, Joshua left for work with this weird energy, like he was planning something. I didn't think much of it at the time. He'd been moody lately, probably stress from work or whatever. But a few days later, when I tried to use our joint account for some shopping, half the money was just gone. I called the bank, thinking there had been some kind of error or fraud, but they told me the account holder had transferred funds to another account. When I confronted Joshua that evening, he had the nerve to act like this was perfectly reasonable behavior. "I opened my own separate account," he said, all calm and superior. "I'm just matching your approach. You keep your personal money separate, and now I'll do the same." The manipulation was breathtaking. I kept some of my boutique earnings separate because that was smart financial planning, having your own money in case of emergencies, maintaining some independence. That's what every financial advisor tells women to do. But he was twisting it into something selfish, making it sound like I was hiding assets or something. "I'll contribute proportionally to our joint expenses, just as you do," he continued, like he was explaining basic math to someone slow. The argument that followed was revealing in all the wrong ways. I tried to explain that our situations were completely different. His job paid significantly more, he'd always been the primary provider. That was the arrangement we'd fallen into naturally. But he just kept repeating this proportional contribution nonsense, like he'd discovered some revolutionary concept. When I pointed out that my part-time income couldn't cover the same percentage he was talking about, he suggested I might want to consider increasing my hours or finding better paying work. Like my job satisfaction and work-life balance meant nothing. Like I should just sacrifice my happiness to make his spreadsheets balance out. Then he started this whole petty campaign that was clearly designed to punish me for having boundaries. Cooking meals only for himself, cleaning only his own messes, basically acting like we were roommates instead of married partners. When I'd leave dishes in the sink, they'd sit there for days until I finally handled them myself. My laundry would pile up while he did only his own loads. The most ridiculous part was how he acted like this was all so mature and reasonable. He'd gotten into therapy or self-help or something, always talking about reciprocity and boundaries, like he'd discovered some profound wisdom. It was exhausting dealing with his constant scorekeeping and passive-aggressive behavior. When my car wouldn't start one morning, and I needed a ride to meet Veronica for shopping, he actually told me to call a rideshare. His own wife, stranded, and he couldn't be bothered to help me out because he was in the middle of something important. "I'm just giving you what you give me," he kept saying, like he was teaching me some profound lesson about marriage. It was childish and manipulative, designed to make me feel guilty for not being the perfect little housewife he apparently wanted. I wasn't about to let him manipulate me into submission with his games. When he started withholding affection and acting all cold and distant, I decided to remind him what he was missing. I bought some gorgeous lingerie from this boutique downtown, planned a romantic evening, really put in the effort to reconnect with my husband, but he actually rejected me. Said he was too tired, using the exact same excuse I'd used when I wasn't in the mood, which he was clearly throwing back in my face. The pettiness was unbelievable. Here I was, making a genuine effort to fix things between us. And he was playing these mind games instead of appreciating the gesture. So I started involving people who could talk sense into him. I called his parents, explained how he'd suddenly become controlling and financially manipulative. His mother was shocked. She'd always seen Joshua as this steady, reliable son, so hearing about his sudden personality change really concerned her. I reached out to my own family, told my dad how Joshua was withholding support and treating me like a business partner instead of his wife. My father was especially upset when he heard what was happening. "A real man takes care of his wife without keeping score," he told Joshua during a tense phone conversation that I could hear from the kitchen. "That's what marriage means, providing and protecting, not this nickel and dime nonsense." But Joshua had an answer for everything, always staying calm and reasonable sounding while making me look like the unreasonable one. He'd say things like, "This is between Victoria and me," when people tried to help, like he was taking the high road by dismissing legitimate concerns from people who cared about our marriage. The financial manipulation got worse. He started splitting every single expense down to the penny, even things that had always been joint decisions. When I wanted to plan a weekend getaway to the spa resort that Veronica had recommended, he insisted we split it 50-50, knowing perfectly well that my boutique job couldn't cover that kind of expense. "We both work," he said, like my part-time position was equivalent to his demanding career. "We should both contribute equally to our entertainment expenses." He was using money as a weapon, trying to control me through financial pressure, while acting like it was all about fairness and equality. The whole time, he maintained this superior attitude, like he was teaching me valuable lessons about adult responsibility. Things reached a breaking point when I went on a weekend trip with Lindsay and Veronica. We'd been planning it for months, and after everything Joshua had put me through with his attitude changes, I desperately needed a break from all the tension at home. The girls were incredibly supportive, helping me see how toxic Joshua's behavior had become. "This isn't normal," Lindsay kept saying as we got pedicures at the resort spa. "Husbands don't suddenly start treating their wives like business partners. Something's seriously wrong with him." We had an amazing time. Spa treatments, incredible dinners, some much-needed retail therapy. I found this gorgeous dress at a boutique in town, and Veronica convinced me to get the matching shoes too. "You deserve beautiful things," she said, and she was right. After months of Joshua's penny pinching and emotional withdrawal, I needed to remember what it felt like to be valued. The total on our joint card was around $1,400 for the whole weekend, which really wasn't excessive considering it included the hotel, meals, spa services, and a few purchases. I'd seen Joshua spend more than that on his boring work conferences without thinking twice about it. But when the statement arrived, he completely lost his mind. Had the nerve to say I should pay for my personal luxuries myself, like enjoying life was some kind of crime. When I explained that I couldn't afford those expenses on my part-time salary, he suggested I should find a better-paying job. The insensitivity was staggering. He knew I loved working at the boutique, knew it gave me flexibility and time for the things that mattered to me. But he wanted to force me into some high-stress career just to prove a point about financial independence. "Trust is earned through actions," he said, tapping the credit card statement like it was evidence in a court case. "And your actions show you want independence, not partnership." That's when I realized how far he'd fallen from the man I married. The Joshua I fell in love with would have wanted me to be happy, would have supported my choices, would have been proud to provide for his wife. This new version was cold, calculating, keeping score of every dollar and every gesture, like we were business associates instead of partners in love. When I told him I wanted a divorce if he couldn't go back to being the husband I needed, I expected him to come to his senses. Instead, he just nodded calmly and said he understood my position. No fighting for our marriage, no promises to change, no recognition of what we were throwing away. Just clinical acceptance, like he'd been waiting for an excuse to end things. Within 3 days, I had divorce papers delivered to my workplace. He'd apparently been planning this for months, had lawyers ready, had documentation of every financial transaction and household contribution. The whole reciprocity thing had been a setup, a way to build a case against me while making himself look reasonable. The divorce proceedings were a complete nightmare. Joshua had kept meticulous records of everything, every expense, every contribution, every conversation. His lawyer painted this picture of me as some kind of gold digger who'd been taking advantage of his generosity, completely ignoring the emotional labor and social contributions I'd brought to our marriage. They made it sound like I'd been living off him like a parasite, when really I'd been a normal wife with normal expectations. I'd elevated his entire social life, made his house a home, supported his career by being the perfect partner at work functions. But apparently none of that counted because I hadn't been his personal chef and cleaning service too. The settlement was insulting. Because I'd kept my boutique earnings separate, which he'd encouraged early in our relationship, and because I'd only worked part-time, I got almost nothing. The house stayed with him since he'd been making the mortgage payments. The cars stayed with him since they were in his name. I got half of our minimal joint savings, which amounted to less than $3,000. 5 years of my life, and I walked away with basically nothing to show for it, except the clothes in my closet and whatever furniture he didn't want. 8 months later, I'm living in a cramped apartment across town, working full-time at a department store job I absolutely hate just to cover rent and basic expenses. The boutique couldn't give me enough hours to survive on, so I had to take whatever I could find. My days are spent folding clothes and dealing with difficult customers instead of the flexible, enjoyable work I used to love. Meanwhile, Joshua seems to be thriving. I heard through Jeremy, one of our mutual friends who still talks to both of us, that Joshua's doing well at his job. Bought himself a new car, even started seeing someone. Some quiet, unremarkable girl who probably thinks she's won the lottery, landing a guy with a steady income and his own house. It's disgusting how quickly he moved on. Like our 5 years together meant absolutely nothing to him. Like all the love and partnership and shared experiences could just be erased because I didn't want to be his unpaid domestic worker. The worst part is how everyone seems to think this outcome is somehow fair. Like I was supposed to be grateful for a husband who turned marriage into a business transaction, who kept score of every gesture and dollar like we were competing instead of building a life together. I gave him the best years of my life, made his house a home, supported his career by being the perfect wife at his professional events. I brought culture and social connections to his world, elevated his entire lifestyle from boring bachelor to married man with an attractive, engaging partner. But apparently, none of that mattered, because I didn't want to spend my days scrubbing his dishes and ironing his shirts. Look, I'm not bitter about how things ended. I'm just realistic about what happened. I married a man who promised to love and cherish me, who seemed to understand that marriage meant partnership and mutual support. But he changed the rules in the middle of the game, decided that being a wife wasn't enough, that I needed to earn my place in his life through domestic servitude. If wanting to be treated like a partner instead of hired help makes me difficult, then I guess that's what I am. But I know what I brought to that marriage, and someday he'll realize what he threw away when he chose his spreadsheets over his wife. The truth is, some people just aren't capable of appreciating what they have until it's gone. And by then, it's too late to fix the damage they've done.